Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. I know it's a Friday night and most of us, I'm really happy that you have all joined us today. This is a very important topic that we came up with as a team. We have a team of about 6 people, mental health advocates who got together. They are each from different organizations, like we have sorry, remind me again, Eve.
Africa Healing Foundation.
Anyway, so Eve has her own, yes, so what I'll do is I'll ask that the committee to introduce themselves and what exactly they do, what their organization is, and then I can begin with the introduction of our speaker. This is after now we have done an icebreaker. So I would like to begin with Eve. You can just give us a brief introduction of yourself.
Thank you for that, Mweri, and thank you so much for thinking of this. It's such a good initiative, and I'm so happy to be part of this initiative. My name is Eve Mapanda. I am Mental Health Director at Africa Healing Foundation. I also have a mental health lived experience. I'm also a mental health practitioner and also just being very passionate about mental health. I do a lot of mental health advocacy work. Part of my work has been doing work around crisis cases, the management of suicidal cases, prevention, and also just wanting to understand, what drives us to a point of suicidality. Oh gosh, my mouth. Yes, so I can't come on camera today. I'm usually on camera, everyone, but I'm having a bit of a strange thing going on with my face. But however, if you look on my page, you will get to see me. And I'm just so happy that Eugene has agreed to be here with us. So, and I'm looking forward to today. So we can hand it over to Happiness.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. My name is Happiness Ndanu. I am a mental health advocate, as well as the founder of Kijana Jasiri Foundation. So basically, we create awareness about mental health. Our main target group is teenagers and the youths in the university. I'm currently based in Mweri, and I'm happy to be here, looking forward to engage with everyone.
Okay, thanks a lot, Happiness. We'll have Edgar. Are you in a position to speak?
Hi, guys. How are you? Good to be here. Glad I was able to finish it here today. Glad to be here. Good to see you guys. And looking forward to sharing the conversation here. Welcome, Eugene. Good to see you.
Nice to meet you, Edgar.
You're breaking up.
Me?
Edgar, you're breaking up. I think we're going to have a few problems today. It seems like we've got quite a few connection problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Mweri, you can carry on.
Okay, fine. So I think I've introduced everyone. Pal, could you please unmute and let us know where you're from as well, your organization?
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Pearl Kicha from Ghana, and I'm a public health nutritionist. I do freelance consulting with the Diet Maze, and I also work in the clinical setting. I'm particularly interested in how diet affects our mental health and how we can become better versions of ourselves. That's why I'm here on the platform. Thank you. Better versions of ourselves. That's why
Okay, Pal, we didn't hear you clearly, but I've seen you've muted again. So as we continue talking, we'll definitely get to know each other. Now, I'm looking at the time, and Eugene, our amazing speaker, said that he needs to drop off at 8:10. So I'd just like to do a brief introduction. Today's session came about because we realized that there's we are all aware that there are certain images that they use that can be triggering. We also have noticed that there's a lot of sensationalization around mental health. It seems it's the new thing that everyone is running after to be able to report these things and have the latest stories. So what we wanted, or what we're going to take out of this conversation today as journalists is how are we going to create awareness using the platforms that you have. I mean, out of everyone, even as much as we talk about social media, but definitely the coverage that you have as media companies is quite wide because it covers the whole of Kenya. Or those ones who are not in Kenya, I know there are some in Zimbabwe and other people in the UK. So I just want to add that the media is a key source of information about mental illness for the public. And research has shown that media coverage can influence public attitudes and perceptions of mental health. Yes, these portrayals can give an exaggerated impression of the actual rate at which violent incidences occur. And in reality, incidences are rare and often better accounted by other factors. So with that introduction, I'd like to introduce our amazing speaker, Eugene Karuri. He's a BBC journalist, a mental health advocate. He wears very many hats, so I'll allow him to introduce himself and then you can pick up the conversation.
Thanks, Remy. Honest answer, ni umenichocha sana. So, you have overly hyped me. I walk into this with so much pressure, so much weighing on me. So, my name is Eugene Mweri. I'm a TV broadcast journalist, mainly with CGTN Africa. CGTN is an Asian version of the rest, the ones you know. I'm also a correspondent for health with the BBC. On the other hat I wear is mostly now I'm considering my big hat is video games. I love video games so much. So that's been my main direction. I am the head of esports at GS Studios. It's a video game publishing company in Kenya. On the other side, I am a mental health advocate. That came about due to my personal story and my own journey with mental health. I am not a professional. Let me start there. I am on a journey like everyone else. I'm not a mental health professional, just someone who's been in it. So my journey, I'll just give some background. I started off in local TV in Kenya, at KTN, then Citizen, then I left and went to foreign press, where I currently am. At the time of that transition, was about the time of my first suicide attempt in 2017 of August. That was my first, attempt on my own life. So I got help. I sought help about 4 months later. And it's probably the first time I ever said to myself after being diagnosed that I tried to take my own life. I was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety. And it's been a journey managing since. So the topic today basically is in responsible reporting. Now, the one thing I've done, at least I can say I know well, is my career in journalism. And that's one end of the spectrum where we normally don't get it right. Now I can sit here and list where all local TV in Africa, not just Kenya, because this is an African issue, gets it wrong. We've seen it, and that's pretty much the subject of today's discussion. there's this thing most journalists learn when when we're in campus. It's the journalists' role have this power, they like to say, it's called agenda setting. Now, that thing we learn called agenda setting is basically what we learn when we're in the field called framing a story and how we frame the story. Now, the power in the pen or the typing of your story or the writing of your story or the telling of your story comes in the framing, because in what we do, your role is not just to tell the story, but people perceive and form an opinion based on how you told the story, which brings me now to the mental health side of it. Mental health in Africa has already been stigmatized leading up, for the past over a decade already. And it's been a journey trying to get people to change their set ways and opinions about it. The African feeling of mental health and what people think when they hear the word mental alone. Now, the role of the media in propagating that stigma has, according to research of late, this is as of last year alone, and during the COVID period from 2019, it's alone, the role of the media has actually, it suggests that the new research suggests that the media is fueling the crisis that we have in form of the stigma. Now, I'm acceptant of that blame as well, because our role has been perpetually we've been trained to get the story first, or make it as interesting as possible, make the headline as splashy as possible. And in the process, people, you tend to offend people, trigger people who already are maybe dealing with that story personally or relate to that story personally by just throwing certain images, throwing certain words in a story, saying certain things in a script that are rather inconsiderate of the audience who might be seeing this. So let me just go to a few examples. And I'm going to give examples without having to mention who wrote them or who typed it out or whatever, because that's not the focus is not who did it. It's what can we do to make it better, right? So the one thing that there was a study that was done, and this was right before COVID actually happened. So we're asking, what the criteria of, and this was in print, a print journalist, that was for newspapers. And their opinion was this. It was an honest question. And I asked if they can do it on the record, not because I was doing a story, I just wanted to know, it was for a personal study. So the majority of mental health stories, this is their words, are usually about some poor people in a remote village suffering from mental illness. So we can feel like mental health issues should have been left in the 90s, as in if you're having a mental health issue in this day and age, it is weird. It's like, this is not a thing of our traditions. This is for a family that has mad people. Now, this is someone whose job, end quote, let me just end quote, just so you don't, those are not my words. So just keep in mind, this is someone whose responsibility is to deliver a story, for example, on someone who's taken their life tomorrow. This is their opinion. This is their personal opinion on the story. Of course, the way they deliver the story will not be any better in the third person telling it about someone else. They will not humanize the victim. That will not be their priority. The priority is getting the scoop and making the headline as readable as possible and, as detailed as possible for you, which is where now the biggest failing, that is actually literally the only failing for broadcast. I can go to the others where, the others are fixable with time, but this is the major one. How we tell the story matters because it helps others form an opinion on how to tell that story moving forward. Now, another one, this is more of a story that all of you actually know. Recently, there was a popular Kenyan female boxer, and you can actually tell where this one is headed. So one reporter had this to say. Now, this one is, I took it from an excerpt straight from as the newspaper printed it that day. Mental health problems. It's something we expect with people whom we don't know and who are uneducated and poor. But it is strange that this disease has affected Kenya's biggest female boxer. That sentence alone, I mean, it propagates the notion that this mental health and mental health ailments in general are meant for the poor. That so long as you have money, this is not your problem, right? That and another study finds that now let's take this away from the headlines themselves. We find now, I'm going to talk about the journalists themselves, the journalists ourselves on the ground, because I'm assuming if we have anyone who's joined the Zoom that actually, is in this line of work. A study found that exposure, and because journalists the sad thing is journalists see the worst side of humanity literally every day. They have to report on it every day, which makes them cynical people. And it's very hard to maintain some sort of positive, bubbly personality in that line of work when you're out in the field seeing, the worst people have to offer. And that kind of trauma on the job may make people psychologically, dismissive in regard to telling those kinds of stories. When you now come to the job itself, it makes you a pessimist, makes you dismissive in certain empathy, and the kind of ways you're supposed to tell certain stories. Yes, and at some point, well, you've seen the kinds of stories that come out. So in an environment where journalists pay very little attention to their own mental well-being, the media representation out of that media houses about mental health is bound to be biased and even scarce in having any sort of empathy or any ethical reporting towards it. So it should start also on the. So solution one is, for me, I'll put it this way: solution one, because we're not going to just point out the problem. Solution one for me is provide personal and mental health support to these journalists in certain cases. And I'm a firm believer in making sure that there's a proper work-life balance, because for people who see certain harrowing stories every day, it will be prudent to make sure that they're able to check on themselves on a regular basis, right? Being able to openly admit that, hey, I need to speak to someone psychologically, makes them able to relate when it comes to telling that same story about somebody else who may have gone through the same, right? The second thing on a solution-oriented basis is, the first one is, again, mental health coverage for the journalists, mental health cover for the journalists themselves. Their own companies, their own organizations need to make sure that those journalists themselves have their mental health service quietly catered for when those journalists need it. That way, when it comes to having the kind of empathy it needs to report certain stories, they're able to have social cues to tell. It's not just about the scoop in this moment. There are certain things we need to consider. The second thing is giving them a proper course in reporting of these stories. And currently, MCK, the Media Council of Kenya, does have a guideline set, because this is as of the past. This is actually as of this year, because this has been a conversation going through with other people from the Mental Health Association of Kenya, Alliance of Kenya, rather. They've been having coordinations with MCK on training journalists. So this is something that's been going on throughout the year. And MCK responded and had got a guideline for reporters and journalists on how they should report responsibly. So this is openly available on their site. They do clinics like this and visit media houses on a regular basis. Now, that kind of training, sensitivity training, is necessary, and retraining, it's necessary to instill that thought, because again, at the top, the fourth estate, the message that you send trickles down to the rest of the people. So when reporting the story, the one thing most media houses have made sure that they haven't been doing well is, for example, a scenario when someone takes their own life. The wrong way that we've been seeing it happen is the person goes in with an insensitive image, one. then goes into detail of how this person went on to take their life in grueling detail, describing the scene, how bloody, how messy it was, or what they did, and how people blah, 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 showing the worst of it. If it's a visual scenario, they show the families in whatever, distress, wailing all over, all that, those horrible scenes to look at. And if it's print, they just write the gruesome details of what the note said, blah, blah, blah. Basically dehumanizing the victim, embarrassing the victim, right? Just, and makes it look like, okay, this is not something that people will never look at it like we need to treat. We'll never look at it at the angle of, this is something we need to treat, but mtu alikuwa na shida enyewe, right? It doesn't make it look like they belittle the victim in a way that people cannot empathize with the victim at all, or empathize with future cases. It's more of looking at them like the whole, generalizing everyone as using words like crazy, mad, blah, 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 stuff like that. Now, that's the wrong way. The correct way will be this: making these journalists aware of the different conditions, not generalizing cases under offensive words like crazy or madness and stuff like that. Make them aware of the number of mental health conditions that exist out there: schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar, depression, anxiety, dementia, eating disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders, ADHD, post-PTSD, all the conditions. That way, when they report, the proper way to be report a scenario like that would be this: in brief words, this person took their life. You do not have to go into whatever was left behind. You do not have to describe the scene. Maintain the dignity of the person in question and the family, but just in the end, do your job and report the story, but do it in an ethical way. You just have to share the necessary things. This is what happened. This is the case. Speak to a professional who will get you the sound bite that you need in a professional way, right? And describe the condition, give more information about the condition, and offer solutions in the same story on how, how people are treating such situations and what to do in certain scenarios. Not just when you sensationalize the worst part of that story, it hasn't exactly helped anyone. So offering solutions by being able to identify the particular condition there, being able to identify the condition, being able to identify solutions, being able to involve professionals well into that story. That way, the framing of the story helps trickle the message down that, hey, we have this crisis going on, but there's a way of treating it, and you can look out for these signs in people you know, or even in yourself, right? You can look out for certain signs in yourself, and this is the way you can get help. So that way, that kind of frames, not kind of, it's rather well frames the story in a way that actually helps, that actually does something to rectify the problem. Because in the end, again, your job is not just to tell the story. It may seem that way, but the job actually does frame the story, whether you like it or not. How you frame the story, people form an opinion about it. So is there a better way of addressing this without belittling the victim? Yes. Identify, fine, you're in a scene, this has happened, report the story of this has happened without belittling the victim. You do not have to go into graphic details. Avoid offensive images. There's the proper medical terms that have been, trained out there. Like they hung themselves. No, they did this to themselves. No, it's more died by suicide, stuff like that. Measured language that still maintains the respect and without belittling the victim of this particular case. So basically adhering to the suicide reporting guidelines, especially in low-income countries where it's often sensationalized and stigmatized or even criminalized, like here in Kenya, would help in mitigating those issues a lot better. I honestly, unless I missed anything, I think that will be me setting the record for the shortest shortest Zoom ever. So I think that will be pretty much it on my end, unless now I'll just leave the room open to any questions and I'll try and answer as best as I can.
Thank you so much, Eugene, for that. I definitely personally have learned a lot, as much as I kind of get upset at how the media cover some of these stories. I really like what you've said, especially the part for provide assistance to the journalists. That's the only way they can get to understand about these conditions and what they go about. And also something else I really love is the way you've said that speak to a professional so that they can be able to guide you on how to report these conditions ethically. So pretty much that's about it. Now, for me, my question is, what are some of the triggers? This is now for the people who are in the call. What are some of the images that can trigger reporting that they do? So what can you say about that?
Sorry, your video froze for a bit, so that most of the question got a bit lost.
Okay, I hope this will be better.
Okay.
So can you hear me now?
I can hear you now perfectly.
Yeah. So now my question was, you talked about avoiding putting up trigger images that can trigger people or reporting in such a way that to trigger people. So
Yes.
what are some of these images that the journalists should avoid, and what sort of reporting should they avoid? Yeah.
Okay. Right. So the visual images, some of them are self-explanatory, like showing images of, the body, images of the body, images of the instruments that were used in scenarios where the person ended up taking their life or attempted to do so, images of in incidents that, some of the incidents, like, unfortunately, I have to speak on it. For example, in the being in foreign press, I have seen incidences that usually don't occur on our continent, like mass shooting in schools, right? So in Kenya, that's not a thing, but in the States, it's a story that I have to look at every week, where someone comes into a school and shoots a class full of kindergartners. Now how do you report that? How do you even start on that? Because the person is said to have been, when they go into the background of this person, they've had this and this issues, they've been diagnosed with schizophrenia before, they've seen this, how do you start reporting that? So on the go, common sense should tell the person, hey, images of kids who've just been killed are not things people want to see at all. Images of the instruments used to do that, or images of instruments used in the process of maybe suicide or something, are not things we need to see. At some point, it's even best to just show empty graphics or just text on screen on certain things, showing, maybe showing the location is fine, maybe showing interviews with the authorities, statements from professionals, stuff like that. But where you can avoid it, graphic images that may trigger, like blood, instruments used in the said situation, should not be shown at all. The framing of how it was done, there are elements that are unavoidable in saying that this so-and-so went into a school and shot children. That's unavoidable, and it will have to be the story that's told, but you can tell that story and still maintain the dignity of those involved. So that will be my take. I don't know if I answered that one well.
Yes, you definitely answered it well. And I would say, for me personally, the reason why I also proposed this webinar to the committee or to our team is because one of the things that personally triggers me all the time is when people put an image of the noose, because that is standard. Like anytime someone has attempted suicide or died by suicide, they will put that rope. And little do they know that just by putting that rope, like for me personally, who has struggled with suicidal thoughts, it will definitely affect me. And sometimes it has even affected my overall health. Not only does it affect me for that moment, but it's something that I'll carry through, because I'm like, why did they have to post that? Maybe it's something that I would have done. Maybe I know someone who has died by hanging themselves, you know? So that is one of the most important things that for me, I keep saying that the media need to understand and know that it is very important. And then just to add on to that, there's something called suicide contagion. Now, suicide contagion is where you'll find that like suicide is contagious, according to the way they say. So if someone is suicidal at this point, and then they see something on media about someone who has died by suicide, it will definitely encourage them to what they have been afraid of doing. So these are some of the things that can cause triggers and actually increase some of the numbers of suicide and things like that. Now, I would like to open the floor to anyone who would like to ask Eugene a question before he drops off. I would really like if we were to just share a few questions. I'm seeing Eve has put her hand up. Go ahead.
Before Eve goes, sorry, one thing. I hear you, Remy, and you know the sad thing is, even at my own workplace, I think there was a time I was on air. So you know how it is with anchors is when you're on air, you can hear what's happening on the other side of the gallery. So I was on, and I can hear one of the producers. We were running a story that was debunking the myth about mental health ailments being hereditary and blah blah blah. It was just debunking, fact checking. So this person made a joke like, hey, it's a disease of handed down madness. Hiya. So I'm like, okay.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm like on the other side, I'm like trying to hold myself because we're live and I am visibly pissed off. I really, you know, someone needs to catch hands. And I am, you know, I'm thinking, how do you just handle it? And of course, I as tempted to be human as I may have been, it was more of thinking, okay, this is someone whose job is literally now, this person is at the top of deciding what goes on and what gets cut off, you know, the message that goes on there. How will I say it? This person tells me how I'll say something. And if this is the person who's thinking up that script that I'm supposed to go up there and read, there's a problem. And fine, I sat the person down and expressed that I was not comfortable with what they said. And in a calm manner, I want to lie that I was calm. I was not calm at all. It was messy, but I made sure he knew that it was, you know, that was not okay. So I hear you. The thing is, it starts down at perception. And honestly, I wish I could say that there's a magical solution to these trainings, to training journalists as a whole and blah, blah, blah. But again, personal perception is where I usually tell people it starts with you. If you can change the mind of your friend next to you on what they think, they in turn can trickle down that kind of empathy towards someone else when they learn, hey, this is not okay to say out loud because of this and this. So as much as I'd really advocate for these trainings, I'd also say that each of us bears a responsibility to correct somebody you hear, you know, call out someone when you hear something that's definitely not okay and doesn't sit well with you. Don't sit angry silently, but call it out, because that person will end up trickling down that same ignorance, you know, down the chain. Sorry, it's just that I heard what you said and just spoke to me because I just remembered that scene. And yeah, sorry, Eve, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much. Wow, I'm like, just some of the things that you have said today, and I wish so many people are going to tune into this to listen to some of the things that you said. And when you were talking, I'm in the UK, and obviously news reporting is quite different. They wouldn't show things like that. But I have been in situations, obviously I do tune into Kenyan news, and I've seen some of the displays and the visuals. For someone like me who's also suffered from, depression, panic attacks, anxiety, and also being a suicide survivor, it's something that is triggering, having to get a WhatsApp message of someone who've hanged themselves, and people think that it's okay to move these things along within media. And I think there's something that you say that really spoke, and that is the way, I think, language, in terms of getting for the journalists to get to know the language. It's not, killed themselves, or they say here, committed. That's like you're blaming the person when you don't really understand what their struggle was. So I just wanted to know, in terms of with what you've said, and also just from the perspective, because obviously some of the things that you've reported, I have witnessed it here in the UK as well. How can we better be, especially for those in the journalists field, not just use their friends or the person next to them, but how can they start that for people who've got, families within their homes? Because I believe that's where education starts. So what advice would you give for someone in your own household? What do you do to encourage those conversations?
In my own household, it's more of simple things. Making sure that everyone feels comfortable with the idea of talking things out, because that's where it starts. When people don't feel that they are comfortable with the idea of talking it out, where people plant the idea that talking something out makes you a sissy of some sort, or you're quite whiny, you just want to talk all the time, you want to cry about things all the time. When that notion is planted, that seed is planted for one time, the window for someone to open up when they should have opened up closes, and they feel that, hey, it's okay to withhold things, it's okay to just press problems inward, and it creates that notion that that's okay, and people shouldn't express things. And that feeling of not wanting to express things because it feels like you'll be too much of a wuss and you'll burden others, leads down the chain to what we see, the final result, taking one's own life. And certain ailments, they usually start as a seed planted, a small one. And that small seed where you ask someone to just man up, or just stop whining all the time, that small seed, it grows to what the kind of problems we see now, where people are unable to have any sort of emotional intelligence, and talk things out. Where we here in Africa, it's branded that mental health is more of a poor people's thing. Well, you forget, most of these wealthy people have already, they've become comfortable with the idea of speaking to therapists in private because they can afford it. On the other end, God help you if your insurance can cover mental health. I mean, that's a blessing on its own. So yeah, it starts off at home with the simple things like encouraging the idea of talking things out. That is pretty much where I start on a personal note, where I start with my friends, making sure they feel comfortable with the idea of talking things out for even the most minute issues of how badly your day may have been or how difficult something may have been. Just talk it out. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. I think there's Gary wants to say something, or you've got your hand up. Gary, you're on mute.
Hi, sorry. I was trying to find the unmute button. I had moved my screen. I'm in the car. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for this. This is very interesting, actually. The question I had was more or less on the focus of you, the journalist. Is there any training or any support that you guys get? Because obviously, as much as we are triggered, I would like to think you actually reporting on it or actually posting, or the people working in production actually have to see these things firsthand. And you go to sites where there's so much crime, all these terrible things that have happened, and you see them firsthand. And the next question is it a conscious decision for people to actually post, report and put these visuals on television whereby we know that it could trigger somebody? Is there a reason why some things which are too horrific are placed for people to see or showed for people to view?
All right, to answer the first one, in all honesty, and this is the honest answer, that depends on the media house you work with. Does your media house have a budget for that? Does the healthcare plan for you, your media house have for you, cover things very well? You have a good health plan, because that's the honest answer, Gary. Luckily at the BBC, they force every journalist. They go through extensive training for the certain things. I can't say the same for local media, because I can tell you, for local, it is everyone for themselves, God for us all. For local, for foreign press, they tend to be well covered because they have a certain standard. Most foreign press organizations have that standard of keeping their journalists on certain health plans. So people who see war zones, like Reuters, AP, all those who tend to travel a lot into the most hostile areas, they tend to force their people to get regular checkups. So which is good, because they have proper plans for that. Now let's go local. That's not the same case local, because local, you'll consider, like, speaking for a country like Kenya alone, most insurance doesn't cover mental health, and that's only, you're lucky if yours does. A good number of them, for the basic person, the common person, doesn't. And so thinking of a journalist who's starting up on the lower end, bottom of the food chain, no, they're not covered. They don't have a plan, which is what talks like this are meant to, or webinars that are usually held by the Media Council of Kenya, are usually meant to rectify that problem, that most of these people do not have the etiquette, they don't have the training on that kind of scenario, and how to report on, like, the worst of disasters. The second question on why we sensationalize this is because the demand of the newsroom is we be first with every piece of the story, every detail. Let me go for the worst of the worst, the Westgate attack in Kenya. When it was unfolding, the very next morning, this attack took 4 days, yes, 4 days to 3 days, 4 days, to clear up. And while it was unfolding on day one of the dailies here had an image of a lady spattered in blood, fresh off, whatever had happened inside the Westgate Mall, as they were shooting up and, people. The demand of the newsroom is that you want your site, your station, to be the one that has every minute detail being seen, such that people stay there. And the pressure to do so forces people to do the worst things. And ethics goes out the window, and that comes from the highest point of the food chain, to a point where people who do understand the problem, and people who do feel, hey, this is a bit unethical, we shouldn't be doing this, have no say at all. When it comes from the top of the food chain, and the food chain thinks we need to be first with this, and if we're not first, we need to make up for that by doing something else outrageous, get an image that no one else has. And that forces media houses trying to one-up each other into the worst competition, which you end up in what you've just described. So that's pretty much the rationale that goes up in there. It's usually free for all. Literally, it's Black Friday for bad news. Just everyone trying to get the worst image to just get people to read. So long as the eyeball is on your station, on your newspaper, on your website, on your site selling the story, the worse it is, the better for them. Sadly.
Wow.
Okay, then.
It's a shame that it really is like that, but and there's no overall sort of support that's there if you're working for a local news. So if you're working for a local news station and you don't get the support, is it down to you as an individual to go and look for it, or there's groups that you can join that are generalized
what
that
I
you
know
can be
is
able to join that extent?
what I know is it's currently for most of my friends who still are in local and from places I used to be, and I know they don't have a health plan. It's usually up to them, and I can tell you they sure as hell depend on their friends to talk things out. They sure as hell depend on their friends to check up on them to make sure they're okay. I have seen mostly photojournalists break down a lot. I had my own similar situation back in local that forced me out of the field for a while. So right after Westgate happened, I was arrested while shooting, and here's the best part of the story. I did not go to a police station. I was taken directly to committee prison. I was taken, yes, directly to a prison cell for interrogation, all because I was light-skinned. That was the rationale the police were using at the time. And I had just gone to shoot 500 meters from my house because I was just shooting images of Nairobi. And I asked to go and get my press card to prove I am a journalist. They wanted a bribe, but they decided to make things as difficult as possible. So directly to frustrate me, they decided to say that I look exactly like one of those people, and they need to pursue this, whatever, on terrorism, whatever. So I went directly to committee prison for interrogation, which, interrogation is sitting down and getting your ass kicked for a while. And it took me 5 hours because I was off the grid. They made sure I disappeared and confiscated my phone. It was until I got a bit hostile that now the police guys in the prison started giving me back my communication things to call the media houses, to call anyone I knew to find me. And that's when I got moved to an actual police cell. So after that incident, I did not leave to go to town at all for 7 months. I could not do that. I could not do field stories. I have not done field stories since. My life has been in the studio news since till date. So yes, did I manage to get help for that? I did. Did it fix the issue? To an extent, yes, it did. But it tells you what the kind of things these people see and they are not able to get help for, because at the time I was in local media and I didn't have any healthcare cover. Now I joined Foreign Press, and that's for the first time I had actual mental health cover. I got to see a therapist whenever I needed to get away whenever I needed to. So the live situation on the ground is most of these reporters are depending on themselves or their friends to talk things out as an outlet. At the end of the day, after 5 or after their hours is their outlet with friends.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Eugene. I hope, Gary, you've gotten the answers that you were looking for. And I'm seeing that there are no questions from the crowd, or rather from the attendees, but I'd like to hear a couple of voices from
Waidera has raised her hand for a
some
question.
of you journalists.
Warimi, there's a question. You're breaking up. I think
We can just get to
Her internet, I'm sure her internet is just
I know.
because we have 6 moments.
Your internet has just been, couldn't hear you. There's a question. Someone put their hand up.
Warimi, there's someone who has their hand up.
Sorry.
Go on, Waidera.
Okay, I can't see the person. If the person was,
Hey,
Waidera,
Yes.
please ask the questions that you. Okay, hi dear, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good, good.
Oh, okay. You can hear me. So
Yes.
Great. I love the webinar. Thank you so much. It's amazing. Based here in Nairobi as well. And I am the founder of Heart of Humanity. I do mental health and human rights training. So I have a question. How do I link the human rights of the person who has had to probably die by suicide um, to make a message stronger to journalists who might not really receive it unless you bring in the
Whether we can't hear you clearly. Kindly speak a bit louder.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, better. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yes. So how do I bring in the human rights aspect onto everything? So in terms of mental health and human rights of the person who has probably died by suicide, to a journalist's attention so that they can actually feel the need to incorporate dignity into the story. What angle would you suggest?
Well, damn. Hey, okay. You came at me with a hard one. No, that's the purpose of this. So that's a good one. So what?
Sorry, Eugene.
No, that's perfect. No, that's perfect. That's perfect. I like it when I'm stumped. So to humanize the human rights angle, so the question you've asked feels like you're coming at it at a scenario where the journalist has already written the story and made the mistake of writing the terrible op-ed about the situation. So the angle is you've read the story, it was really bad, and you want them to realize they did this wrongly, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So this is after the situation, and so I would say this, you've seen a situation where, for example, maybe a story that was written, you've read it, it had everything that we've called a red flag in this meeting.
Yes.
The first thing would be to honestly write, to reach out to as many people as possible. Because I'm going to give this as an honest answer, because I'd go for the idealistic type of go directly to the media house and as in writing to them directly. But it will be buried under a lot of ignored messages. So the first thing would be to mobilize people, like people in the fields of mental health, sending out that particular article to people involved in that field, right? When that's made, they're aware that this was written this way. The sad thing with our society now is that we have to make noise for certain people to see it, to see it happening. So like the article I read on about the boxing celebrity, the lady, we all know who that is, but that story, when it was written, all the stakeholders in the mental health side had to write to the various media houses that wrote that story the way they did, in such a way that, the good thing about social media, which is a good thing and a bad thing, I'm a personal believer that Twitter needs to be burnt to the ground, but it works in the sense that you can make noise and they will hear the noise. So if you can get the stakeholders involved in mental health, in basic human rights like NHCR and the like and all the rest, and the mental health alliance of Kenya, such people involved, and they see the story, they have the reach to make sure that these people and the authorities themselves, like MCK, because MCK is paying proper attention to such things now, to make sure that this media house cannot sweep that story under the rug. They cannot sweep that reporter and that story under the rug and pretend it didn't happen, which is what has happened before. When the proper noise is made by the proper channels, they are forced to do something about it, which is sadly how the only way we can get things done right now. So that would be my advice. Reach out to the people or certain stakeholders in the media side or in the mental health space, who will in turn share that what went wrong and share solutions to the media house, because the idea is not attacking the journalist, it's more of rectifying and correcting them. So reach out to MCK, who would in turn correct these people on what they need to have done, which is usually the structure of how they're supposed to do it. In turn, the media house will now retract the story and do it rightly. So pretty much, yeah. I don't know if I got that one correct. I don't know if I got that across correctly.
You did. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you've said collaboration is key in creating awareness. That sums it up correctly, better than my rambling.
I think
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Happiness has her hand up. Been waiting for a while.
Happiness, hey.
Hi.
Hi, Instagram buddy. Hi.
Mine was a question out of curiosity. So is it that, like for journalism students, is it that you guys don't have units in the university while practicing that prepares you for that experience during your practice period? Because I'm just trying to think of it from a young journalist's point of view, who has gone out in the field, and now you have to have all these different encounters that come about in your day-to-day activities. So just out of curiosity, should we like go back to when you're practicing, and yeah, should it just go back to there, or how is it?
Yeah, this is I'm smiling because you've asked a very, dig the knife in kind of question, because yes, now this will go back to I want us to flash back to the point where you were going to college. Each of us got the question of which each college had this course you wanted to take, but for some reason this college was better than this other one, right? They will tell you this one has this facility, they have this and these. Here's the situation with the one I attended. The one I attended was all theory. I'm a journalism student who has attended this university and have never held a camera until I graduated. I first held it when I actually went on the job, right? So yes, I can tell you for a fact there are certain universities that literally just have certain things by name, and a whole line of people graduate without the proper training of what they're supposed to be doing in certain situations. So yes, it does boil over to the general training down at the student level. So it does boil down to that as well. It's supposed to be there. There's literally a course in journalism that's supposed to be there called ethics, media ethics. In every journalist's course, there is a course called media ethics, regardless of which campus you are in. But for some reason, some properly gloss over that one. And it's not taught in the way it's supposed to be. So people don't exactly have the incentive of paying attention. So yeah, it's supposed to be there. It's straight from training down there in the university. That one you caught. That one you hit the nail on the head. Happiness. That was proper. It's supposed to be there from the grassroots.
Okay, thank you for that, Eugene. And actually, when you were talking, it has made me realize that it would be good to start from the bottom, for these people who are coming into the
field, yes.
The field, yeah. So if now, say, for example, the people in this group who are part of the committee, probably that's something else we can discuss, on how we can also approach the journalism students to have them get to understand some of these things. And also, I normally do a lot of trainings with young people, and I've come to realize that they are quite knowledgeable when it comes to mental health. And so I think it would be easier to start with the students as opposed to now the oldies who are already so used to how they report, but now start from the bottom so that even as the years go by, the reporting will actually change to give dignity to the people, to the families, to use the right wordings, right image, and etc. So I think that is good enough. Eugene, we have gone past. It's 8:35 now.
I don't mind. This was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to have this
Thank you
conversation.
so much for being here. For those people who don't know, Eugene is very big on mental health. He introduced himself earlier, but it says good for me to say that he's very big in mental health awareness. And also for me, what I would say, Eugene, is that may God bless you for everything that you're doing for people out there, because I know you're doing really amazing work. And yeah, so that's all I can say. I hope we'll get to continue engaging on these things and see what else we can do to improve on the media reporting on mental health. So that's all I can say. I hope the rest of the team, you've learned a lot. Just quickly put in your comments on,
I think
your
before you
what
go,
you'd like to say, tell Eugene now, and then we can wrap up the session.
Max Mbathi has
Yes.
asked a question in chat. How heavy is wrong reporting of casualties of mental health conditions, of mental conditions on the people suffering from them? Wow. Okay. Yeah, that is a proper question. Thank you, Max. The wrong reporting of casualties stems, especially in Kenya, stems from legislation itself. Now, this is the sad part about it. In Kenya, suicide is criminalized. And with that aspect, when someone takes their own life, sadly, when that is being logged in as the police, they don't log it as a suicide. Suicide is not recognized as a means of death. They record it as homicide. So the statistics, we cannot get like proper numbers in terms of how many people are actually doing this. In fact, when the mental health the commission that was formed by the former President Kenyatta to look into the cases and do the stats and whatever, were doing the research, I openly called it out in during the mental health conference as guesswork. I called it out as guesswork because they made the mistake of inviting me. I say the mistake because my job is literally to call them out. So I called it out as guesswork, because as long as the legislation still says that this thing is illegal, they cannot, it hampers even the UN from, or any other NGOs from doing proper statistical whatever's on the actual numbers of casualties from suicide and mental health conditions. So they can't even get proper numbers on how this thing is affecting the grassroots, because not everything is being logged. The police don't log it at all. They just come for a body and they leave and they log it as just crime, part of like another homicide. So the ones that get logged are the ones we know of, the ones that happen to make the news. That's what you get. That's the stats that even make it to UN stats. The actual numbers could be way higher. And what I forgot to mention is what I do in the mental health space. My role was, because when I finally got help for myself, it was more of trying to get other people out of it. So I started using my own phone number as a suicide hotline. That meant using my social media, my page, because at least that one had a bit of a reach, and people will send screenshots of this person has tried to has posted what looks like a suicide note, so it's okay, can you help find them? And we try and find this person, and wherever they are, I will drive out and go and find them and see what we can do. And I started making deals with my friends in my space who are psychologists. They run their own whatever, their own firms, their therapy, whatever's, their own practices. And we'd come to an agreement on how we could subsidize the cost of what I could cover for a certain few sessions. That was pretty much it. So it got worse during COVID, when we had all these lockdowns and these situations were happening and these people can't even go anywhere. So I'd misuse my press card, of course, to get through the barricades, just to find certain people. And the one thing I found was, even the authorities themselves, suicide being illegal here, but they were empathetic. Police were empathetic enough to consider this is a person who needs help, and instead of putting them in cuffs, it's more of, let's get this person to where can we take them? The cops themselves don't know. So it was now for me at that point trying to find what happens in certain emergency situations. So yes, it's heavy. The reporting of wrong numbers, the wrong numbers of casualties is hiding the problem. It's more of covering the problem right now. the numbers being reported are not good either, but the real suspicion is that they are way worse because of that piece of legislation, which is why the current reform in Parliament is to remove that section of the Constitution that criminalizes suicide, so as to help these, the bodies that are supposed to do their job, the statistical bodies and the bodies that are supposed to get like NHIF, the insurance fund for everyone, create packages that work for everybody so they can get the same kind of help and the same kind of treatment in mental health, which is not covered as it stands. Sorry for rambling, but that's pretty much it's heavy. It's very heavy. The numbers are more than are actually being reported right now.
Thank you for that, Eugene. Before we close, I think Gary had put his hand up, but before we go to Gary, I just want to say here at Africa Healing Foundation, we do have mental health support and it is free. So do reach out to us. I'm going to put the email on the chat box. I'm also a mental health qualified practitioner. So I am part of the team that takes care of kind of like the counseling part. So please feel free to reach out to us. That is why we're here. And also, even if you're just even if you're someone in the mental health space that just wants to collaborate in raising more awareness, whether it's here in the UK, we're in the UK, we're in Zimbabwe, we're in Kenya, let's collaborate in making more noise. Gary, do you want to say something, and then we can then close for with Wairimi?
I was going to, but he answered my question in terms of the support that he was giving through COVID on his mobile phone and on his social media. Because the question I was going to ask was, considering all this that what help are you actively actually doing to help other journalists be able to overcome some of these if they don't have the support system in their media stations?
I think he's answered that.
Yeah, I think I answered that.
No, that's what I'm saying. He's answered it. That was what my question was going to be, but he answered it.
Okay. Stella, we'll take your question and then we can wrap up.
Hi, my name is Stella.
Hey, Stella.
Hi, I'm a mental health advocate and also diagnosed with schizoaffective and ADHD. So I want to raise more awareness and I would like to join. Okay, I think I have, I feel I have more, I feel I can learn more from you guys and work with you in raising awareness. So yeah, how can I go about it?
Is that to me or to Eugene, Stella?
Either of you, or both of you.
I think Eugene has put his. We've actually got on our Mweri calls it committee, or we're actually mental health advocates who've come together. But actually, on our team, there's someone who also has ADHD. So if you can just direct message me, I'll give you my number. And then we can kind of have a chat about that and kind of see how we can support you. And then I think Eugene on his part, I think he's put his.
Oh, that was for a general. That was for a general, the general chat. But on this end, there is the group of people who have certain. Everyone has their own condition that came and formed the Mental Health Alliance of Kenya, and. We'd be definitely happy to have you around, Stella. So I can also put you in touch with the person you'd need to speak to. You'll just speak to join us, or even I would. Same thing as that Eva said. Just direct message, and we'll just see the way forward.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Wairimi, over to you to close for us. Warimi.
Yeah, so sorry, I was on mute. So I must say that I'm really excited that we've had this session today. I'm also really happy we got an expert to come on board. I know he's super busy. Also for the participants, whichever media house you're from, or maybe you do your own journalism, thank you for being here. If you have any questions, as Eugene has given his details online, there's Eve. Yeah, you can also reach out to me on Let's Go Mental Kenya. So yeah, so let's see how we can continue to break the stigma around mental health, proper reporting. And yeah, I'm sure we are going to make an impact in no time. So with that, the webinar has come to an end, and hopefully we can have another one
next month. We do this
like
every
this
month.
one. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So next month. Yeah.
See you, everyone.
Okay, guys. All righty then. Good night.
Bye.
Good night, you guys.
Cheers. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.